Hi, we're here at the MAAWG conference and people have asked us, how have things changed in the past decade? I'm John Levine, one of MAAWG's senior technical advisors, and this is my friend Dave Crocker, one of the other senior technical advisors. So, how have things changed?
Quite a bit. The first spam was sent in 1978 by a digital equipment corporation salesman who didn't know how to use email very well. And so he sent what really was a spam message to about 120 of us, and he overflowed the to field. The technology of spamming has gotten rather better, and one person now can send to 120 million people with rather more success than the digital equipment corporation salesman had. He received quite a strong negative feedback, and today spammers get quite a lot of money. So we have an anti-spam problem that is now an industry because we have a spam problem that's an industry. And I think that what we've seen in the 10 years of MAAWG is a move from a desperate effort to try to stem the tide to a much more stable environment in which the bad actors are still there. There's still 90 to 95% of the open internet that is consumed by spam and abuse and the like. But the filtering that is done by the anti-abuse people is now good enough that most users don't see this.
That's certainly what I've seen. I mean, spam has gotten a lot more professional. I mean, back in the 1990s, you know, there were guys showing off, there were guys selling things that purported to be plans for atomic bombs. You know, now there are professional crooks selling fake Canadian drugs, you know, and it's all broken up into a supply chain. There are people who write botnet software, there are people who install botnet software, there are people who manage the herds of bots, there are people who then rent them to the spammers, who then are working for the guys who are actually selling the fake drugs or running the pump and dump schemes or whatever. So as they've gotten more professional, we've gotten more professional. You know, and it used to be that there was one guy at an abuse desk, and there was a guy named Afterburner who sent personal responses to every spam complaint with a distinctive style that we all like. You know, and now that's just impossible because there's vast amounts of spam, and it's all gotten much more professional. It's all gotten more automated. You know, and I'm thinking it's kind of like the banking industry. I mean, the threats are different, but everything the banking industry does, they have to keep in mind that people will try to cheat them and steal stuff. So that everything they build, there has to be a level of security built in to anticipate the sorts of bad stuff people will do. You know, and I'm thinking that we need to anticipate that people will attack us too.
Oh, absolutely. And as long ago as 10 years ago, certainly 15 years ago, there was a belief, however naive, that we could eliminate spam. And of course we succeeded. It's all gone. Well, or maybe not.
Well, the users think so.
And it's almost a problem that users don't understand just how bad it is out in the wild. That makes it more difficult to recruit them to some of the issues. And one of the things that drives me absolutely wild and will get me up at the microphone in any MAAWG session is someone saying that the solution to whatever topic they're talking about is to educate users better. Users are who they are, they do what they do, and we need to design mechanisms that take that fact into account, just as we need to take into account that there are going to continue to be attackers. The model with financial institutions, I think, is exactly right. They don't try to eliminate fraud, they try to bring it under control.
Yeah. Also, user education is, it's sort of it's a depressing challenge. I mean, to some extent you can educate users and say things like, your bank is not going to ask you to type in your password in an email, except of course there are occasionally banks that do. And even beyond that, I mean, there are people who just, it's like, it was right there on the screen. How could it not be true? You know, and I've talked to people at abuse desks who say, like, their mother called me up and said, I probably shouldn't have answered that mail.
So we need to keep in mind just how difficult this issue is. The temptation is to believe that if only users would pay more attention, if only they understood a little better. And what I always enjoy is the discussions on some anti-abuse mailing lists where someone sends a copy of a message and asks, and this is a group experts, asks, is this spam? And if the experts aren't sure, how can we expect real users to be sure?
Yeah, or even, is this a phish? Is this really from some big famous bank, or is it fake?
Right.
And yeah, every time I've done it, if half the people get it right of these experts, it's a lot.
So one of the trends that I think I've appreciated a great deal within the MAAWG community and anti-abuse in general is the goal of having mechanisms that do not involve the user. They work before the user's involvement and without the user needing to know or be involved in any of the mechanisms. That's more of a challenge, but I suspect it's also more likely to be successful.
It's true. Like a major set of things we've done is authentication. I mean, it used to be that there was no authentication at all on email. I mean, it was just like paper mail. I could write your return address on a MASH note and send it to someone and get you in trouble.
And I did that to you. Oh,
yes.
No, I didn't.
Well, that was you. Well, anyway. And so, although for some reason it's never been a serious problem with paper mail, it's a huge problem with email, because spammers fairly quickly discovered if they put their own return addresses on the spam, people would just filter it out. So they started putting on random addresses, and then we filtered that out because you could tell that they weren't good. So now what they do is they pick a pair of addresses out of the spam list, one to be the recipient and one to be the fake sender. And the really sophisticated ones steal people's address books. So the spam appears to come from someone but it actually doesn't. So we have a whole bunch of things with acronyms like SPF and DKIM and the currently contentious DMARC. And I think that one of the problems, even here we sometimes have, people say, oh, you can just present the signature to the user and they can decide whether it's good. And no, you can't do that. It has to happen behind the scenes. I mean, I think there are places where users can help. Feedback loops are helpful, but you can't expect the user to be the primary security manager for her own account.
And one of the major benefits, I think, of the ongoing activities at MAAWG is it's a place where these kinds of issues, different ideas, different experiences, get discussed by people who are competitors with each other and who are partners with each other to try to consider how useful some new technique might be, how to integrate some new technique, what problems some new technique is causing. And so there's the controversy of the moment. There'll be another one next year or the year after. And it's an ongoing industry effort. There is the entire question being raised at this meeting and almost every meeting back for some years of moving over to IPv6. And the tendency to believe that email over IPv6 should be somehow different from IPv4 email. And trying to really make all that work is one of the examples of topics that get talked about here, so that the industry transition and the entire internet transition works more smoothly.
There is certainly a lot of that. I think another place where MAAWG has helped and where the industry has changed, that 10 or 15 years ago, ISPs competed saying our spam filtering is better, and they would have secret spam filtering techniques. And they have pretty much decided that, although it is in fact important to have spam filtering that works really well, first, users don't want to hear about spam filtering. They just want the spam to go away. But more than that, anti-abuse has to be collaborative. I mean, it's like if each bank had its own secret anti-abuse schemes and they didn't cooperate in fighting financial fraud gangs, they'd make no progress. And I think that the industry has figured out that, and again, feedback loops are a good example of this, is that the providers are sending security information back and forth to each other that helps them both.
I think you're raising an example of what really is a paradigm change in anti-abuse. The original model, and it's still important, is one of the individual receiving site having to take this flood of mail and figure something out about what's good and what's bad. And that what the move towards authentication and feedback loops is to try to add a collaborative model where good actors who are sending mail and good actors who are receiving mail can help to distinguish the legitimate mail from mail that's sent by others. That's an enormous change. I think even though we've been doing this now for 6 or 7 years, I think it still represents something that's fairly new, and we're trying to understand that. I'm hoping we do more of it, because the ability to move to these kinds of authentication models means we can move away from using IP addresses for reputation. That's been the reliable underlying authenticated information, but it has its limits, and it's always had problems. And for IPv6, of course, it's not useful at all.
Well, actually, I have two separate thoughts here. One is that early on, people thought that the way you dealt with spam was that there was a small amount of spam among all of the nice emails. So we'll just knock out the spam, and the good email is left. Now, these days, we have a small amount of good mail in the vast swamp of spam. So it's, in some sense, it actually should be easier to try to recognize the real mail than to recognize the spam. And this is where authentication is taking us. And I agree that things will be different with IPv6, but I don't even think that people have seriously wrapped their heads around the approaches that IPv6 allows. As an example, at one of the sessions this morning, people were pointing out that if you have an email service provider that has thousands of tiny customers, at this point, they all have to share an IP address, because there just aren't thousands of IP addresses for small volume mailers like that. But in IPv6, IP addresses are basically free.
I actually think that's a bad thing, because I'd rather get them away from caring about IP addresses.
Well, no, the reason I think they should also authenticate in other ways. But the point of giving everybody their own IP address is, if a particular sender turns out to be bad, the recipients can then block that sender without any collateral damage.
Right. And the reason I'm stressing this is, you're absolutely right. And given the history of how we have identified bad actors, that sounds like a good thing. And my point is, I'd like to get away from IP addresses as being relevant to assessing reputation. And that's ambitious, but I think it's where we have to move for the future with IP addressing.
Yeah.
But I think we're missing what's really distinctive about MAAWG. And it has gotten quite a bit better over the 10 years. I think the parties here are just much better than they used to be.
Well, they've gotten more professional, too.
And on that note, we'll say thank you for the opportunity to talk about MAAWG and talk about the future and the past. And thank you for listening. I'm Dave Crocker. This is John Levine. See you at MAAWG.